Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. Before I begin my discussion today, I want to show you the four films that I purchased in the recent Criterion flash sale. The first one is Birth. Three of these are pretty recent releases, directed by Jonathan Glazer and starring Nicole Kidman. I'm a big fan of Kidman's. I've done several videos on the movies that she starred in. I always like her sense of adventure in picking out roles, and this is certainly very complex. This is a very complex character that she's playing in Birth. And then secondly, I picked up the Coen Brothers' The Man Who Wasn't There, their only film that was released in black and white. It has I remember it having very much of a film noir feel to it. It's Billy Bob Thornton who stars in it on the cover. But I remember being disappointed with this movie, so I'm hoping to get, when I revisit it, I know they have a lot of character actors here, and but be honest, I don't remember too much about this film, which was unusual for the Coen Brothers. And then I picked up, from the golden age of Hollywood, Captain Blood, starring Errol Flynn. This is the first time Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland appeared together. They were quite the pair in films. I think they made 4 or 5 films together, with Errol Flynn at his most vital. He's a very charismatic star, and I think this is the movie that really made him a superstar in Hollywood. It comes with a commentary by Alan Rode, and I'm really looking forward to hearing him because he wrote the book on the biography of Michael Curtiz. And then the last one, I think, was released last year. This is The Grifters, directed by Stephen Frears, with Annette Bening and John Cusack and Angelica Houston. This is based on a novel by Jim Thompson. I recently did a French adaptation of a different novel by Thompson, Série Noire. And Thompson is an amazing pulp writer, and I've read the novel that's based on, but it was free on Hoopla, so I downloaded it the other day, and I've begun reading it to compare with the film. I think this is widely accepted to be probably the best adaptation of a Jim Thompson novel, though I would disagree. Bernard Tavernier's Coup de Torchon, which I'll talk about someday on the channel, is my favorite Jim Thompson adaptation. So the film I'm going to talk about today is kind of an antidote to my last video, which was on Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. Shouldn't have too many laughs in it. So I'm going to talk about Sullivan's Travels. When you need a laugh, go back to Preston Sturges, and who wrote and directed Sullivan's Travels, starring Joe McCrea and Veronica Lake and her peekaboo hairdo, and they or at least Joe McCrea here is sort of dressed in his tramp outfit, which comes into play in the movie. But in the beginning of the movie, we hear that he is a very successful Hollywood director, John L. Sullivan, and he has made movies for his studio, and it made $1 gazillion. But they're light comedies, musicals, titled Hey Hey in the Hayloft, Ants in Your Plants, 1939, So Long, Sarong. But he really wants his overwhelming desire to make a different kind of movie of social significance, to explore the world the world of the downtrodden and the people who have suffered poverty. Even though he himself, John L. Sullivan, has come from a very privileged background, and the 2 producers from the studio don't like this idea at all. Let's make Ants in the Plants 1940. Let's not, we're making so much money from these movies, and they poo-poo this idea that people don't want to watch movies that have social significance, even though The Grapes of Wrath had come out about a year before that and won Academy Awards, and was a big hit with the public as well. So eventually, they go along with this idea that that he can make the film, but he objects now. He says, "You're right. I don't know anything about poverty. I don't know how average people live, no less the most impoverished people in the country." So he wants to go out on the road. He's going to become a hobo, and he's going to go out on the road, ride the rails, and see what it's like, so he can make an authentic movie because he's experienced it himself. And this was based on John Huston and William Wilde in the 1930s. At the height of the Depression, they actually did that. They went out. I don't know what the outcome of that particular traveling led to, but so he dresses up as a hobo. He has a butler and a valet who both also try to tell him this is a terrible idea. It's a dangerous idea. So, but they allow him to go. But then they're following him in this caravan with all the luxuries that he would have at home, and he makes a couple efforts, but he always ends up back in Hollywood. But along the way, he meets this, when he is in Hollywood, and he's just been brought back, and he doesn't have any money in his pocket, and he goes in to get a cup of coffee at a little diner. He meets Veronica Lake, who is a actress who is giving up on her dream of being a movie star. She wants to go back home, and they strike up a conversation. She agrees to buy him dinner or buy him breakfast, and they immediately hit it off with some great dialogue. Veronica Lake is very good with the Preston Sturges patter. So this first scene in the movie, this scene where he's trying to convince his producers to allow him to make this important film, "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" Is in a one take. I mean, there's no cuts in it. I think they only took one or two takes to film it. It was a very hard scene to film because you have this like ping pong dialogue that's so fast paced, and you get a real sense of energy. I love it when they don't do all those cutting because it gives the energy of the scene really builds up, and it's really a master class in comic writing and acting. I mean, Joel McCrea and the two producers are just fantastic in delivering this. There's another great scene later in the film, probably the most famous scene in Sullivan's Travels, where Sullivan finds, almost accidentally, he finds trouble that he could have never, so deep, so dark, he could have never imagined the trouble that he gets himself into. But there's a famous scene towards the end of the film where these convicts are led into a black church. We see the preacher, telling the congregation that these convicts are coming and we need to show them love and understanding. They sing, "Let My People Go." It's just a beautiful scene, and you never know what you're going to get in a Sturges film because he can go from tone to tone, different tones, so successfully. So then they lead the convicts in. They get the parishioners in the first rows moved to the back. The convicts come in. This is from a chain gang and the worst conditions you could ever absolutely imagine. And so they show them a cartoon, a Mickey Mouse cartoon. They're in chains, and they look as bereft of hope as you could imagine. And when they see the cartoon, they just break out into laughter, one by one by one by one. And certainly Sturges is making the point that even though the director thinks his films have no meaning, the lightweight comic films that he's made, but they do have meaning in people's life. The laughter is just as important as drama would be, could be. And in the performances here, we get the full array of Preston Sturges character actors. I won't name them all, but if you've ever seen the Sturges film, you know who these people are from other films, and they're great actors. And Sturges gives everybody, all his character actors, even the smallest little role, they have something special about it. They either get a laugh from a line they deliver, or their body language. It really adds to the richness of the comic vision of Preston Sturges. And also the scenes between Veronica Lake and Joe McCrea are really good. Like I said, Veronica Lake was very good at adopting this type of Sturges dialogue. Joe McCrea didn't like to do a lot of dialogue. He said with Preston Sturges, it was almost like he was singing a song. He said it was just so perfect. And so the scenes between Veronica Lake and Joe McCrea have a erotic charge to them, and Veronica Lake is very, very pretty. They make an interesting contrast because Veronica Lake doesn't even come up to the shoulders of Joe McCrea. But there's a scene in a pool where everybody gets pushed into the pool. This was actually Preston Sturges' own pool, and they shot a scene, a magnificent entrance into this scene, or magnificent living room, with a high angle shot. And I thought, boy, they couldn't have built, this couldn't be a set. They couldn't have built a set this magnificent just for the two characters to walk through. But it was actually Preston Sturges' own house and his swimming pool. And then they sit outside and drying themselves off, and Veronica Lake is showing a whole lot of leg. And as with Barbara Stanwyck in a previous Sturges film, The Lady Eve, she acknowledges the sexual attraction. And Barbara Stanwyck being very open with it, but Veronica Lake as well. So we see a good bit of leg, we see a good bit of thigh as her robe sort of comes open, which was very unusual for 1941. And then as they're doing their patter together, she's also, she has her hairbrush, and she's like stroking her hairbrush up and down. How this got by the censors, who knows? Sturges was famous for delighted in trying to get things by the censors whenever he could. So this adds to the appeal of the film as well. And I mentioned the character actors. I can't mention all their names because there's so many. William Demarest is there, and you probably remember. I think he was in every Preston Sturges film. And Sturges, when the film came out, it wasn't a big hit. It wasn't a big critical hit, but it did well enough. Now, his previous films had done spectacularly well, and he does. After this, he makes the great moment, a story about the man who discovered anesthesia with Joe McCrea, which the studio didn't know what to do with it because it was such an oddball movie, so they shelved it. And then Sturges made Miracle of Morgan's Creek, which I think was by far his most popular film with the public, and also Hail the Conquering Hero. Then he broke up with Paramount. This was the studio that he had worked for as a screenwriter for about 10 years before he was allowed to become a director. Sturges was the first Hollywood screenwriter to be able to become a director. Billy Wilder would soon follow. Joseph Mankiewicz would follow a few years after that. And then Sturges left Paramount, and he signed a disastrous contract with Howard Hughes. He was basically never the same again. He does make one more really good film, Unfaithfully Yours, with Rex Harrison, but the 2 or 3 other films he made were disastrous commercially. I don't think Unfaithfully Yours with Rex Harrison and Linda Darnell, I don't think that did too well at all. So he spaces. He'd already had 3 hits, I guess, with The Great McGinty and Palm Beach Story, Lady Eve, big hits. And then he had this film, and then the other 2 films that I mentioned earlier. So, but all these came in like 5 years. It's one of the most incredible creative explosions that any movie director ever had. But he went to the top, his star burned bright, and then it just burned out altogether. We get a 75-minute documentary on this edition, which was made in the 80s for PBS, covering the entirety of Preston Sturges' career. It's really a really good documentary, because Sturges lived an incredible life. You can hardly make up the life that Preston Sturges lived. A video essay by David Cairns, in which Scottish director Bill Forsyth stops by to pay tribute to Sturges and his influence. We get a commentary that includes Noah Baumbach, Christopher Guest, and Michael McKean. Very disappointing. A few good insights are in there, but they try to be funny, and they're not very funny, at least not in the context of this commentary. So I love the artwork that Criterion did on this, and they didn't do it just for Sullivan's Travels. They did it for the three films that the three big successes that the director John Sullivan had. So we get a look at Hey Hey in the Hayloft, and also So Long Sarong, and then we also get the poster for Ants in Your Plants, 1939. I always thought it was Ants in Your Pants, but it actually is Ants in Your Plants. So director John Sullivan never got to make his movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? But the Coen brothers, 60 years later, did make Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. Do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.